Hello, everybody. It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood, a beautiful day for neighbors. Could you be? Would you be? Won't you be my neighbor? Welcome to week 3 of the Don't Ask Me Why podcast, friends. And I'm here along with my colleague, Reggie. Good evening, Reg.
Good evening.
We are here, as usual, to bring you opinions, our picks, news, things that maybe other shows haven't thought about as they look back on the previous week in the NFL. And one thing I've noticed, Reggie, is that people ask us questions all the time. People that I know personally that have watched and listened, and people that chime in with questions on the different mediums that we're on, and it'll be like, why do you have that opinion? Why did you make that pick, et cetera, et cetera. But what do we all have? What's our response to that every single time?
Don't ask me why.
Exactly. Don't ask me why. Opinions are what they are. Our picks are what they are. We just hope that you enjoy and that you're entertained week after week. And we hope that you'll continue to listen and watch. We're now not only on YouTube, but where else can our consumers of our podcast find us, Reg?
Spotify as well. We should be on Google Podcasts, Apple coming soon, but certainly you can reach us at Spotify. Our link information is on our Twitter homepage, as well as on our YouTube page. So make sure you subscribe.
Absolutely. Make sure you listen and subscribe down below.
Yeah, right here.
Yeah, right there. Let's start with our week 1 pick, with our picks from last week. And you can start with yours. I'll let you go first. What was your pick last week and how did things go?
What are they, the silver and black and silver? They left me feeling black and blue. I'm sorry, guys. Week 2, I did it again. Buffalo on that home field, that home field advantage matters. So I guess I kind of got a little captivated with that pick based on Buffalo's performance against the Jets in week 1. But again, another mea culpa. But I'm looking to bounce back nicely. But the Raiders, they let me down severely.
I know how this goes with picks every week. But in your defense, I wouldn't have seen Garoppolo being as bad as he was last week. He was terrible.
That's the story of his career. He looks good, consistent, and then he just soils his trousers.
Yes, he did. My pick last week was, and I felt really good about it from the start, was Pittsburgh at home getting 2.5. And a big part of the reason that was my play of the week, it was the coach. It was about Mike Tomlin to me. When he's just as knowledgeable about the history of 0-2 teams making the playoffs and all that type of stuff as anybody is. He doesn't miss a trick. So he knew that to go 0-2, especially losing 2 home games back to back, would put them in a bad spot, and it might get maybe in some of his players' heads. So that's a big reason I made that play. And of course, they won the game outright. Kenny Pickett still has a lot of improving to do. He's kind of the weakest link right now on that team. But they play hard. They play with heart. They're a reflection of the coach. And that's why I think that, as always, they'll have a winning record this year, and they'll probably make the playoffs.
They're going to need more from Najee Harris in that O-line.
But they also need more from their offensive coordinator. I mean, if you watch that game, I think the first 3 plays that when they had the ball, they threw all 3 downs and went a quick 3 and out and tried to run it on second down after an incompletion on first down. Against a good Cleveland defense, you're going nowhere when you're running on 2nd and 10 when they know that it's coming. So you got to be a little bit better with the play calling. So you and I have been talking this week a lot, Reggie, about the historical, issues when it comes to 0-2 teams and all that, and we'll talk about that in detail in a few minutes. But when it comes to week one, there were teams that were facing that 0-2 start that saved themselves from that, with big road wins. And who were the biggest road wins in your mind, Reg, last week?
Seattle, Baltimore, the Commanders. That was they came from behind. I don't know what that deficit looked like.
21-3.
Yeah, 21-3. So hats off. I think all three played hard. Seattle bounced back from a ugly loss at home to the Rams. Baltimore, I think Baltimore is pretty much on track where I expect them to be in terms of winning the division. So that was a big win in the division. And like you pointed out last night, you mentioned they have essentially a 2-game lead over Cincinnati. Yeah, so I think that's huge for them. And one sneaky one is Kansas City. I think that was a big victory for them to avoid 0-2. And speaking of the Commanders, I think they might be missing Eric Bienemy and that whole Matt Nagy, he's back in the fold. I don't know if that's gelling the way they want it to gel thus far.
It could take some time, too.
It could, but hey, we're so used to them on autopilot, just flowing smoothly for the past 5 or 6 seasons under Andy Reid. Prior to Mahomes, they've always been pretty fluid, and then you add Mahomes, so it was a little concerned, but that was a big victory to Jacksonville, whom I feel that they will probably have to potentially see in the playoffs.
Should have to face, Well, the big surprise for Kansas City is the defense. They're not known to be world beaters on the defensive side of the ball, but last week they were looking pretty good against Jacksonville at Jacksonville. So
Chris Jones got paid.
Yeah. So, I brought up one more question for you, and that is, you brought up Eric Bienemy. What happens with the Commanders this year if, let's say, they win 10 games, they go into the playoffs, they win a game or two. Let's be conservative and say they win 1 game and get in the playoffs. They win 10 games in the regular season. Hal continues to play well and progress. A lot of it you're going to be able to pin on the coaching of Bienemy, right?
Absolutely.
Right. And so, but your head coach is still going to be who it is. So, and there are a lot of people that are talking about Ron being let go even before this season. Right. So let's say they win 10 games, they go to the playoffs, they win a playoff game. Do you fire the head coach and, of course, bring in the logical successor and Bienemy? What do you do?
I'm a believer in don't rock the boat. If it's not broke, don't fix it. If, in fact, they were able to make it to the playoffs, pretty sure it'll be via wild card, and they would actually win a wild card game.
Yeah.
I mean, hell, that would be their Super Bowl.
Yeah.
And I like Ron Rivera. He's pretty much kind of who he is, ex-Bear, by the way. But I don't necessarily see that happening. But what I do see happening is, with that kind of success that you just painted out, I could see these other teams who are in need of a head coach beating down his door, Eric Bienemy, that is.
Oh, sure.
And saying, hey, here's a blank check. If you were able to take the Commanders out of the doldrums of those stale offenses and game plans that they've been running over the past 10, 15 years, we want you aboard. It's not a fluke. You proved that this season, and he deserves it. He really does. He shouldn't have had to go through this year to have to show that, hey, I am a legit head coach when we have the likes of Matt Eberflus and some of these other jokers in that position.
Right. So trust me on this. Josh Harris, the new owner of the Commanders, he's too smart for that. He's not going to let Eric Bienemy go, regardless of whatever he has to do.
If it weren't to come down to that, Eric Bienemy, in my belief, he's out of here. He's out of here if he gets an offer. And like I said, I mean, I'm saying it jokingly, but a blank check may be laid in front of him on his lap, saying, "Hey, you tell us the amount." And if Josh Harris has to make that decision to say, you know what, I'm going to match it, and not only match it, but also get rid of Ron, then so be it. So I could see that scenario playing out before them just saying, you know what, we're going to promote you to head coach. Ron, thanks for the past 6 to 7 years. Good luck in retirement.
Here's your $3 million. Goodbye.
Right.
You know, there's been so much talk, it seems like the first couple of weeks, more so than normally after 2 weeks, about the 0-2 teams. You know, every year you have teams that go 0-2. Some are surprising, and people, you know, sometimes occasionally talk about the idea of like, well, you know, what are the chances of an 0-2 team making it to the playoffs? I think you had some statistics on that, but we all know that it's basically, I think it was like 30 something out of 200 in some teams since in the last 30 years had made it to the playoffs after starting 0-2. So we've got some, you know, teams that made the playoffs last year that are now 0-2, including Cincinnati, the Chargers, and the Vikings. You know, in your mind, especially this year, does 0-2 really count you out? I don't think it does, except for the Vikings. For me, the Vikings are out.
I mean, I think it boils down to each of their respective divisions and how they fare. AFC West looks vulnerable. AFC North is stronger, I think. So that's going to be a tough hill for them to climb, the Bengals, that is. And the NFC North, that may be a toss-up. So I wouldn't be shocked if none of the three teams made it back to the playoffs, quite frankly.
Well, I would agree with you when it comes to Cincinnati winning the division now that they're already in a 2-game hole. But making the playoffs, they're too good. They're too talented. And remember, in some of these divisions, I think last year you had 3 teams out of 4 make it to the playoffs. So
it's not a good start for Cincinnati. 2 divisional games out the gate and you lose both.
That I agree. So that kind of transitions into the idea of, you know, are some of these guys, some of these players, it seems like may have been brought back a little bit too soon when they weren't really ready. I mean, we know that Burrow had a short preseason because of injury, and he hasn't looked good at all. You know, what are your thoughts on guys that might have been brought back before they were ready to go?
I really believe with, like, say, for instance, Travis Kelce. I think Kansas City needed him.
Yeah.
And as long as he wasn't injured,
right,
then I think all is good. All is well. So football, they know it's a violent game. This is what they signed up for. So the risk of injury is there.
And in week 1, you were really smart when you said that, and I think we agreed on this, that Kansas City was very, very smart by keeping him out in week 1. They lost the game, but for the greater good in the longer term, I think it made all the sense in the world.
And that was their version of caution right there, because pushing him out there on that Thursday night might have been, you know, to your point, a little too early.
Yeah.
So compound that with losing the home opener at home to the Lions. Yeah. It's like, you know what, Travis, how are you feeling? You're about 80%, 85%. All right, you're playing. So I'm sure he got targeted a few times. He didn't have a great game, but ultimately they did need him, and they got the win.
What about the big injuries, man? Really season compromising type of injuries for some of these guys. Of course, the Chubb injury on Monday night, I really respected what Troy Aikman said right after that happened, when he said, "Hey, we're not going to show it," because he had already seen it, like on the jumbotron, as had 60,000 people, and you could hear the collective groan out of 60,000 people when they saw that play on the jumbotron. And so kudos to who is it, NBC?
ABC, because I know they had a doubleheader, ESPN and ABC. Yeah.
But kudos to them for erring on that side and saying, like, no, we're not going to show you something that gruesome. There's no sense in it. And kudos also to the Pittsburgh fans. If you might have noticed, as he was getting carted off the field, standing ovation from everybody in Pittsburgh. Right. And those two teams hate each other. Remember?
Yeah, I hear you. But I mean, you really have to be the scum of the earth to not, give an ovation, applause. Typically, and I've seen it in rivalry games, you really have to be really just miserable if you were to boo a player coming off the field. So they did the right thing, but I'm not going to give them too much of a pat on the back, because I think all teams are doing that in those circumstances, especially to a player of that magnitude.
Sure, he's easily, in my mind, I guess, one of the top 2 or 3 running backs in the league.
Yeah.
So there was another injury at the same time on the same play for Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
Do you remember who that was?
It was what, Minkah Fitzpatrick?
Yeah, right. And he came back. I believe, and played after that. So, that was it was devastating. And then so you've got for Cleveland now, you have Jerome Ford backing up Chubb, and he's going to be the starter per the coach. And they're also looking at Kareem Hunt, who has been on their roster before in previous years, but they're looking at potentially bringing him back because you can't.
He's officially back.
Oh, he is back.
Yep.
Okay. As of
about 3-4 hours ago. Yep.
3 or 4 hours ago. Okay. I didn't see that this afternoon. So I just saw that they were looking at him. So and of course, Saquon Barkley, he's not going to play, I believe, this Thursday in that game against San Francisco. Probably a really good idea. He's a quick healer. He likes to, he's tough as nails, but, very smart to leave him out. So we do hear from some of the folks that listen to and watch the podcast week to week. And we had a question from Micah in Nashville, Tennessee. She says, "Hey, Roger, this is Micah. Big fan of the show so far. I know in episode 1, when you had Chris from the Sportsbook, you mentioned that you place wagers. What is a recent win that you've had?" Micah, I couldn't be more happy to have someone ask me that question right now because I had a stellar weekend this past weekend. Every weekend, my play is 2. When I go to the sports book, I have 2 3-team parlays or 3-game parlays. Can be a mix of over-unders, and or point spreads. And I mix them up together. And I had 6 different bets. I had 3 separate bets in the first parlay, 3 separate bets in the second one. And I went 6, 4, 6. So I'm glad that you asked that question. 3 or 4 weeks from now, as you ask that, I might not have a great story to tell. But I will tell you this. With me getting on a heater like that and having a great weekend, picking like 6 for 6, which is really hard to do. I tend to get on a heater. It's kind of like how I am, like if I get the flu. If I get the flu, it tends to stick with me for like a couple of weeks. So I would say when you hear my picks tonight, you might want to listen attentively and consider, using one or two of those.
And what was her name? Micah?
Micah.
Micah, also know that he is in a state where sports betting is legal via an app, but yet he drives 300 miles to a casino out of state.
It's not
to place
300.
bets.
It's 30 miles. It's a beautiful drive in the country.
Okay.
And sometimes older folks, I told you I'm in my 40s now, and you tend to do things a little bit differently, and you don't glom onto the newest thing like online betting. If I was doing online betting, I'll tell you this, Reggie, here's my concern about that. If I had my online account activated, I do have an account, but I don't use it. I would be, if I lost, like in the first 1 o'clock games or whatever, I'd be tempted to go back in there and put more money in. I go to the sports book, I have X amount of money to play with, and that's what I go with, and that's what I play with, and that's what I win or lose with. So that might be good advice for a lot of people, especially people that might tend to have a little bit too much of an appetite for throwing down cash on games.
Right.
Which we don't condone for sure. I had another question from looks like Mahalo in Plano, Texas. He asked about, I guess, Zeke, because he's from Texas. He said, will Zeke have another 100-yard rushing game this season or the remainder of his career? Why don't you take that, Reggie?
No, I think that's a great question. I had Zeke on my fantasy team last year, and that was like the beginning of the end of his production. And I just don't see it with Stevenson as the primary back. I saw him in the game the other day. His touches were limited. He came in on the second drive. I think I'm not sure what he finished with. It was something paltry, something not worth even, discussing. So I personally don't see it. I don't see him being a primary back again. I think those days are long gone. Yeah. So to answer your question, Mahalo, I say no.
I agree with that. The only caveat that I would throw in there would be that I think it's possible, given the fact that Belichick obviously has already shown that he will split him out sometimes on the outside and put him in different formations and whatnot. I wouldn't say never that he'll gain. I'll say never that he'll have another 100-yard rushing game. Of course, anybody can break off a 70-yard run early in the game, and that changes things. But he could have a combined yardage, catches and runs over 100 at some point. I think it's a long shot, but yeah, to answer the question about over 100-yard rushing game, I agree. I don't think it's ever going to happen.
I wonder if there are odds on that.
They're probably pretty long odds, I would think.
Yeah, just curious. Okay, but no, that was a good question.
Yeah, very good question, both of them. And I was very happy to talk to Micah about the first question and my success over the past weekend.
Yeah, a little stroking of the ego.
Yeah, I like that. That. Thanks, Micah.
I feel better.
Thanks, Micah. Listen, subscribe, and send more questions in. I like that one.
Please.
We're toward the end of the podcast now. Let's talk about, we're changing things up a little bit. We've been going with one pick a piece the first 2 weeks. We're going to switch it up a little bit and give you 3 picks each for this weekend coming up. Reggie, do you have yours ready for us?
Yeah, and first off, this is my idea because I've been doing so great these past couple of weeks. I was like, you know what? Let me add more picks, and make you more money or lose you more money.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But I will bounce back. I feel good. I feel really good about these picks right here. Lions at home. That was a huge loss against Seattle. Kudos to Seattle. Great performance by Geno. It's always a high scoring affair between those two, but I love the Lions -3 at home against your ATO Falcons. Also, Denver. I like Denver going into Miami. They're getting 6.5 points. This really could get ugly, but Russell's my boy. I think he can hang in there. He had a nice little performance, over 300 yards for the first time in a while last week, 3+ touchdowns. So I really think they can hang with them, not win, but I think they'll cover that 6.5. So I like Denver plus the points, 6.5 in Miami. And then finally, I like Jets, New England under 37. The Jets, their situation is pretty bad. Maybe they'll luck up and get a little deep shot to Garrett Wilson like they did last week. Score that way. They have a running back by committee. The key for them is just if Zach Wilson cannot turn the ball over, then they should be in good shape. But otherwise, I think it's going to be a low-scoring affair. You know how we feel about Mac Jones. So I really think this is going to stay under 37. So play that under 37. Those are my 3 picks. Make money, get money, win money, get that damn W.
Damn W, right?
Yep.
So my picks for this week, and I'm glad that Reggie didn't pick this. So kind of would have felt bad for him to have had to make this pick. But to me, the easiest play of the week is Kansas City minus 12.5 over the Bears. And enough said. I'm not going to go into detail. Yeah, right. And I also like Seattle coming home off that big high of beating Detroit on the road. Pete Carroll just has a way. He looks 20 years younger than he is, and he's got so much enthusiasm. It's infectious. They have so many great playmakers. Geno Smith, to me, is what a great career comeback he has had in the last couple of years. I love it. I love the receivers. And I think that they will very easily cover a 4.5 spread over Carolina. I don't see that game even being, remotely close to that. But so I'll take Seattle minus the 4.5 over Carolina. And stick with me here. Tampa is getting plus 6.5, is getting 6.5 points at home against Philadelphia.
Yeah, saw that.
I like the Bucks.
I'm not mad at that.
I've just got a feeling about it.
I'm gonna leave y'all on one thought, and I'm gonna leave. I'm a big believer in fate. I have a good feeling about this. That's all I'm gonna tell you.
Just have a feeling about it.
Yep.
That's all I'm going to say. Did you have anything to say about that Philly-Tampa game there?
No. I looked at it myself. First thought was that's a pretty large spread and 6.5. And my first instinct was Philly should be able to cover that. And I believe that's in Tampa Bay, if I'm not mistaken.
It's at Tampa Bay, yeah.
Yeah. So, but then I thought back, I was like, you know what? Tampa Bay's been looking scrappy. I can see them muddying things up, to use one of your terms, and keeping that nice and close throughout the entire game. Hurts and the rest of them don't seem to be clicking on all cylinders. So I do like that play. So
let's leave you, before we go, let's leave you with our picks for division winners in the NFC. I'll give you mine real quick, and then Reg, you can give yours, and then we'll move on from there and hope for a good week. I like in the East, in the NFC, I like Dallas to win that division. In the Central, I like Green Bay. The South, I'm going to stick with Tampa. And in the West, San Francisco, of course. Reggie, what are your plays for division winners?
So on the NFC East, I like Philadelphia still. Dallas has to knock off the champ. What's the saying? You got to beat the best in order to be the best, something like that.
Yeah.
So I think Philadelphia, I always think it's a good sign when a team isn't clicking on all cylinders, yet they're still winning. So we know what they look like at their peak.
Right.
So I think Philadelphia at their peak can withstand a Dallas defense. And it just seems like they're so much better. And Michael Parsons just looks even more unstoppable. He's like Thanos back there almost. But I do like Philadelphia nonetheless. In the North, so you're still saying Central like this is 1984.
Right.
It's the North.
Right.
And and you remember the North, the NFC North used to be the Bears, Packers, Detroit.
The NFC Central.
I want to say in Tampa Bay.
Right.
It was one more team. It was one more team. But nonetheless, I digress. But the NFC North, I like the Lions. I love the Lions. I'm on their bandwagon. I think that was a tough loss last week. But I really think in a pretty sorry-looking NFC North, they should prevail in the NFC North. So I like the Lions. In the West, I like San Fran. I just think they're world beaters. And in the South, again, this is a toss-up. In week one, I said any of the four teams in the South could be the best team that week. So I like New Orleans. I think David Carr might be the difference maker amongst a conference or a division with a bunch of younger quarterbacks. So I do like New Orleans.
Love it. Okay, folks, that's the end. That's the end of our episode 3 for week 3 coming up. Best of luck to you if you're laying any money down on any of the games this weekend. And we'll be back next week to recap how our picks went, and hopefully you were in concert with us and we all did well. So appreciate you watching, listening. Again, subscribe and listen down below. We're also on Spotify and soon to be other platforms. So tell your friends, your enemies, share the podcast, the links with everyone that you know, and let us build up DAMW into where we know it's going. So we'll see you next week. Reggie, any final thoughts?
No, but I did want to ask you if you know what are the 3 teams that have started 0-2 who have won the Super Bowl? Just a little trivia to take us out.
Off the top of my head, I can't tell you. Who are they?
Okay, so Dallas in 93, the same season where Emmitt Smith held out those first 2 games.
Right.
Hence them losing. Pats in 01, and I want to say that might have been I guess that's the Rams Super Bowl, and then the Giants in 07.
Right.
That was of course against the Patriots. In the helmet catch. So that's all I have.
Good nugget. We appreciate you listening, folks, and hope you enjoyed this week's show. And we'll see you again next Thursday. Thanks.
Peace.